Traditionally in Western civilization, religion and ethics have been associated closely together. During the Enlightenment, especially in Germany, some thinkers tried to preserve a role for religion, but they understood religion as merely amounting to ethics. They thought that we could dispense with religious authority, with religious ritual, with belief in miracles, and traditional doctrines. For them, religion wasn't really about any of these things. It was just about ethics. It was about loving your neighbor as yourself, turning the other cheek, being a peacemaker. These other traditional elements are at best unnecessary add-ons, and at worst, they're destructive superstitions. But they thought Christianity, for instance, or possibly Judaism, could be preserved, understood merely as a system of ethical teachings. You see this kind of outlook, for instance, in the views of the famous philosopher Immanuel Kant, and in the views of the American president Thomas Jefferson. Notoriously, Thomas Jefferson took the first 4 books of the Christian New Testament, the Christian part of the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and he took out what he regarded as all the unnecessary parts, all miracles, pretty much just leaving the ethics. In a letter in 1813, he wrote to a friend, quote, "There will be found remaining the most sublime and benevolent code of morals which has ever been offered to man. I have performed this operation for my own use by cutting verse by verse out of the printed book and arranging the matter which is evidently his and which is as easily distinguishable as diamonds in a dunghill." End quote. The diamonds, of course, are the ethical teachings of Jesus, and the dunghill is all of the stuff about hell, forgiveness, repentance, healing miracles, casting out demons, and so on. This was a fairly widespread approach among the elite, at least. But in the early to mid-19th century, there was a romantic reaction against Enlightenment thinking in general, and against Enlightenment views about religion. This view pushed back. They saw Enlightenment thinking as too cold, too heady, too intellectual, too lifeless. They emphasized feeling, imagination, and nature. They also strongly emphasized human autonomy, being your own person, being in control of how your life goes, not having anyone tell you what to think or what to do. The first of the 7 classic theories of religion that we're surveying in this lecture is by the German Friedrich Schleiermacher, who died in 1834. He was a Reformed minister, basically a Protestant pastor, and in his view, being religious, being pious, is essentially having a certain sort of experience. He wrote that feeling is the source and essence of religion. Essence is an old philosophical term. It means sort of the defining features of something, the what it is. What religion fundamentally is, then, is feeling. It's not practice, it's not belief in particular. What kind of feeling? Basically experiencing all things in the world as in God, and God or the infinite as in all things in the world. He wrote, quote, "The contemplation of pious men is only the immediate consciousness of the universal being of all finite things in and through the infinite, of all temporal things in and through the eternal. To seek and to find this infinite and eternal factor in all that lives and moves, in all that grows and changes, in all action and passion, and to have and to know life itself only in immediate feeling, that is religion. And so religion is the life in the infinite nature of the whole, in the one and all, in God, a having and possessing of all in God, and of God in all." End quote. Elsewhere, he describes this feeling as a feeling of absolute dependence. You can tell that you're reading a philosopher here when you read Schleiermacher, and a speculative one at that. Frankly, it's not very clear exactly what sort of feeling or experience this is supposed to be. A similar theory was propounded by the German theologian and religious scholar Rudolf Otto, who died in 1937. His most famous book is called The Idea of the Holy. This is one of the most successful German theological books of the 20th century. It's never gone out of print, and it's now available in something like 20 languages. Like Schleiermacher, he held that what is essential to and definitive of religion is certain unique religious experiences. Otto tries to describe these more precisely than Schleiermacher. The apparent object, that is, what seems to be present to one in this type of experience, is what he labels the holy or the numinous. So sometimes these experiences are called numinous experiences. They have a subject-object structure. Not a purely subjective experience where you just feel a certain way, but an experience in which you feel that something is present to you. There's an apparent object there. Otto says that this object is singularly daunting and awe-inspiring, that one experiences might, power, and absolute overpoweringness in this thing. That these experiences are characterized by urgency or energy. This holy, or numinous, he explains, is holy, that is completely other, that which is quite beyond the sphere of the usual, the intelligible, and the familiar, filling the mind with blank wonder and astonishment. And yet your mind isn't completely blank. He also says that awareness of this involves a feeling of reliance on a creating power, fear, awe, self-deprecation, wonder, fascination, and attachment. For Otto, too, then, just as for Schleiermacher, the only thing that's essential to religion is feeling. Anything else that normally accompanies that experience is not essential. Religion could exist without it. Otto says that these experiences, these feelings, that special sort of feeling we just described, give rise somehow to schemas, to ways of thinking, and that these somehow give rise to doctrines, customs, and traditions. That is, the doctrines, customs, and traditions of the various religions. But it's this part that really defines what religion is. Otto is not a completely neutral scholar. He's not just a disinterested observer of religion. He tells us that his purpose is to describe this feeling in a way, quote, so that the reader may himself feel it, end quote. In other words, he wants to describe it in order to help you have a religious experience like this. And this leads to a common criticism of Otto. Is that motive out of place in modern scholarship? Myself, I would say that motive is not really relevant. What scholarship aims at are goals like understanding, classification, explanation, and prediction. I would say that if your theory can do those things, then it doesn't really matter what your motives are. Maybe you're the village atheist and you don't think anybody should be religious, or maybe you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Buddhist. I don't really see why it should matter. That is, I don't see why it should necessarily matter. If your motives do interfere with your accomplishing those tasks, then, well, the tasks haven't been accomplished. Having defended Otto in that way, I don't think this is right. I think this is way too simple. I don't think that doctrines and customs and traditions are just add-ons to religion. I think they've got to be a central part of what religion is. Our third classic theory of religion is by this man, William James. He was an American and was trained in philosophy, and he's really one of the founding fathers of the academic discipline of psychology. Psychology, study of the human mind, of the psyche, was traditionally really a branch of philosophy, but around the end of the 1800s, psychology tried to become a science and branched off academically so that it had its own departments, its own traditions. His famous book about religion is called The Varieties of Religious Experience, published in 1902. It's a really interesting book. I recommend it. A lot of it is people's first-hand accounts of various types of religious experience, ranging from Zen experience of Satori to Catholic mystics' experience of the love of Jesus. It's a classic book for a reason. Like our first two thinkers, he sees individual experience as the source of and the force driving religious beliefs, and all of what he calls the outward forms of religion. He was really the first researcher into what we would call the psychology of religion, which is now an established sub-branch of psychology. He thought there was a central kind of experience that lay behind all religion. He called these experiences mystical states of consciousness. He defined them as having four features. First of these was ineffability. What he meant by that is that an experience of this sort can't be described adequately to someone who hasn't had that sort of experience. The second feature he called Noetic Quality. So that these experiences carry a kind of authority. They seem important. They seem to bestow deep insight. They're not simply feelings of dizziness or lightheadedness. They're not like just being drunk or high, although sometimes people do have these experiences while drunk or high. The third feature, he said, was transiency. That is, they don't happen all the time. They're rare and they don't last that long. And fourth, passivity. They're not something we do. They're not something that we can cause. They're something that falls upon us, something that happens to us. For him, religion fundamentally is these individual feelings. I would object that that may be the aspect of religion that he's interested in, but there's definitely more to it than just these individual feelings. There are the social aspects of religion on the one hand, and then there are the doctrinal aspects of religion on the other. And surely these are not unrelated to the experiences. While he might not have a comprehensive theory of religion that makes a lot of sense, he still is an insightful observer about religious experience. And interestingly, he gives the impression of jealousy, that he is someone who seeks such experiences. In fact, he confesses at one point to getting high on laughing gas in order to seek some kind of mystical state of consciousness. I don't know how successful he was in that. At the end of his book, he gives you what I would call vague supernaturalist beliefs. He doesn't think that these mystical states of consciousness are purely hallucinations or delusions. He thinks there's something to them. He thinks there's something beyond the natural world, but he draws really very few conclusions from them. In our next segment, we'll look at a famous social theory of religion.